You got static in your headphones?
Mm-hmm. As usual.
I gotta get that changed. I can't do this anymore. It's embarrassing. Yeah,
Clear.
bad static through the box, but... Welcome to another exciting edition of American Warrior Radio, the place to be for news, notes, interviews, and current events for all issues military and veteran related. If you or someone you know has ever worn the uniform of the U.S. Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, Coast Guard, or National Guard or Reserves, you've come to the right place. American Warrior Radio, right here on the Talk to Me station, AM 1300 WMEL, and of course we are online worldwide at 1300WMEL.com, sponsored by AVET Project. Folks, this program is all about supporting our troops and their families, both past and present. So please, get comfortable, get a nice beverage, and don't forget a pen and paper, because during the next hour, we're going to bring you important information that you can use and share with others. With that said, let's roll down the runway and get this show off the ground. You all know me. I'm Garen Cohn. I'm an Air Force veteran, a retired legal advocate for veterans, and founder of AVET Project. But you also know that I never fly through the airwaves alone.
Good morning. I'm Glenn McGuffey. I'm retired Air Force and the retired manager of the Brevard County Veteran Services team, where it was my honor to help serve our veterans and their eligible family members for 22 plus years. And as usual, we have a wonderful show for you. Long-term listeners will know our special guest today, and the rest of you will be honored to hear from an expert in the mental health field affecting veterans and their disabilities. And with that, I'm going to kick it back to Garen and let you lead in here.
Well, you know, we're still in the first month of the new year, and we've already told you that we're going to be bringing you, our audience, our awesome listeners out there, some interesting new segments, and this happens to be one of them. You already heard about Journey of the Spirit with AVET Project's Director of Counseling, Joanne Ivins. Well, we're coming at you again with a new segment. It is called Heal the Warrior, Heal the Country. And we are very honored to have one of the most foremost minds in understanding what PTSD is, and also a preeminent treatment provider for those affected by PTSD, none other than Dr. Scott Fairchild, who's going to be joining us every last Saturday of every month with Heal the Warrior, Heal the Country. Doc, thank you so much for being here and being a part of American Warrior Radio on a more regular basis.
Well, thank you so much, Garen. It's always an honor to be here, and I am so excited about being here on a regular basis. I'm really excited today about being able to kick off this series, Heal the Warrior, Heal the Country. You know, that phrase comes from a guy by the name of Edward Tick. A number of years ago, he wrote a couple of articles about it, and he said, you know, if we can heal the warrior, our warrior's healing is directly proportional to the manner in which the community accepts and honors its warriors. And we know out there as a community, you appreciate your warriors, and we want to honor them when they return. So we're excited to kick off this particular segment, and we've got a lot to share with you today and in future weeks. Remember again, that's the last Saturday of each month. We will be talking about psychological trauma, PTSD, and those issues that affect you as warriors and members of warriors' families.
And Doc, you yourself are a warrior, a career warrior. Can you tell our audience a little? Everybody that listens to American Warrior Radio on a regular basis has known you for some time. You've been a big part of the program, but just in case those newcomers to the program, give them a little bio, a little bit about you. Where were you born and raised, and why did you join the military, and your education and all that?
Well, oh my gosh, we want to go back to some of the old history. So,
bring it on.
Actually grew up in the cold of Wisconsin and enjoyed it up there in the great Midwest. And decided to go on active duty when I went into ROTC as part of college training. Coming out of there, I actually had applied to get into the Air Force, but they were full at that point in time. And so I took my Army commission and started off as a lieutenant in the Medical Service Corps. and spent about 10 years working in medical service corps assignments as company commander and with the infantry units and the like, and ended up having the chance to go to airborne training and a few other good and exciting opportunities. But then ended up in my final 10 years working as a clinical psychologist. I went off for training and ended up as a psychologist working both in aviation psychology and in a variety of work at Walter Reed and other locations with post-traumatic stress disorder. So I've really been able to have some great opportunities, and even though I'm in civilian clothes, I consider this an opportunity to continue to serve our warriors.
For sure, and you hold a PhD in psychology, so you know what you speak.
A doctor of psychology, absolutely, and that we picked it up at the University of Denver while I was also co-working as the adjutant general there for the hospital at Fitzsimmons. So it all worked out well, and did my internship at Walter Reed.
And like you, Glenn, he's a career military man, longevity retired Army.
That is correct.
Go Army, beat Navy.
Yeah, we talked about being a paratrooper and being an Air Force guy. I don't know why you jump out of a perfectly good airplane, but
Oh, it was perfectly good, but it was perfectly exciting too. So,
I bet.
And it gave you a good, well-rounded understanding of what our troops go through because you were right there in the thick of it with them.
It was so exciting. Being part of the 82nd Airborne was a lot of fun, going out on the jumps with them, of course. And after about 28 jumps and bumping into a few other guys, I decided it was probably time to hang it up before it hung me up.
Mm-hmm. And that's interesting because we have, Glenn, you as a continuing provider of claims assistance for veterans out there. You deal with a lot of guys and even some gals that have done jumps and been damaged, had their bodies damaged because of it. So,
Well, I almost beginning to think that there's not anybody who's done parachute jumps who didn't come out damaged, because everyone I've ever met to help with a claim, by the time I got through asking them a few questions about their parachute jumping experience, they had a bad knee, they had a bad ankle, all of the above, hips, what have you.
You're absolutely right, Glenn. In fact, I can't agree with you more. As I went to my primary care doctor about a year after I was out of the military, he just was feeling around the bones in my neck, and he said, so you were in the Army, were you? And he said, it sounds like you've done some parachute jumps. And I said, how did you know that? He said, I can tell by your neck. And also now my L4 and L5 is talking to me as well. So I guess when you land each time, it's kind of like a compression on the body. And in fact, when I went down to jump school, one of my friends said, oh, it's nothing. It's like stepping off a sofa into a Kleenex box. And I remember calling him back after my first jump, and I said, I don't know, but my Kleenex box appeared to be empty when I jumped into it.
They're full of rocks.
That's right. But it was fun, all in a good career.
and I'm just communicating with our board engineer, Vince, who's just shooting me a message here. Vince, next week would be great for Commander Yars from the United States Coast Guard. He's going to join us for a bosun's call. But you're talking about the jumps and the compression and the cumulative effect of those type of injuries. And it kind of is maybe a little mini segue. If somebody was involved in a jump that went terribly wrong, such as Bernard Knoll, Navy SEAL, that AVET Project is helping organize efforts to refurb his new home. He was damaged. He did 2 tours over there. He did get a Purple Heart in Afghanistan, but he survived those. He comes over here and he's doing jump duty. And I guess it wasn't exactly jump duty. The ones where they dropped the rope off the helicopter, the fast
Rappel.
Rappel.
and he injured his spine, and they just took his leg off yesterday. Now this has happened about a year ago, but the result of that injury degraded over time and caused him to the point where he had to have an amputation. But in a situation like that, because this is kind of getting material to the point we want to bring today, and throughout the rest of Heal the Warrior, Heal the Country segments, and that's mental health. And I think with our current climate, post-traumatic stress disorder is, the first item on the agenda that we need to address. And the reason I say that is because if somebody had a bad experience on a fall or a jump or something like that, they too could be subject to post-traumatic stress disorder, correct?
Well, you are absolutely right, and it brings to mind, on my 4th jump in jump school, I was the last person out of the left side of the aircraft, and the jump master must have been in a hurry to get to lunch, so he started the guy on the right side at the same time.
No.
So inconveniently, we met each other underneath the aircraft, tried to slip away. He couldn't get away and came back and slid right into my suspension lines, slid down my suspension lines. His boot hit me in the head, and we exchanged a few not so pleasant words in the air. And then we began to work it out. He was entangled. My chute had robbed his chute of air, so his chute collapsed on mine.
Oh, Lord.
And we were entangled and falling. And so we worked it out, fortunately. And eventually I pulled back a couple suspension lines, and he got a couple free. I guess if we thought about the book, which you didn't have too much time to think about the Dash 1 Bravo parachute, we would have deployed our reserves, but we were so close to each other that that would have resulted in an unfortunate ending. So fortunately we pulled the lines back, and as we did, we got about 11 of those 12 free. One was still stuck. And then we came in tandem. And I did remember cracking a bone in my foot, but I just kind of laced it up to make sure I got my 5th jump and got out of Fort Benning and got those coveted wings.
Hardcore, baby.
But you got
You got to finish what you started, right?
You do. But again, you know, as you mentioned, Garen, that can stick with you. I remember it was about 7 years after that when I actually got to Bragg, at Fort Bragg, and went through refresher training to go back out and jump again. And I remember just lining up on the tow line and lining up in the rocks. It all brought back those experiences. And as we talk about post-traumatic stress disorder or acute stress disorder, it can grab you when you least expect it.
Yeah, give the folks out there kind of a high side pass Air Force term definition of what PTSD is.
Absolutely. You know, we're all born with a healthy brain. Usually we may inherit some things like ADHD. And unfortunately, when we experience psychological trauma, when we are overwhelmed, when all of this stuff is coming at us and we can't take anymore, the brain shuts down. Even old Freud had a name for it. He called it a break in the stimulus barrier. You've got this big barrier up there to protect you, your mental health, and all of a sudden, all of this overwhelming stress comes through, and as the brain takes it in, it cannot handle it. It just cannot handle it anymore. And so it's recorded, it's etched in the brain. Unfortunately, it doesn't process. Normally, we process all that stuff at night. But
Let me jump in here. So you're talking about in the outside, away from the military and traumatic events, when somebody has a nervous breakdown. Are we talking similarities there?
Yeah, the bucket is full, and
Okay.
the bucket is overflowing, and it can happen not just in military operations or combat operations, but it can happen in robbery, rape, assault, hurricane, tornado, car accident, loss of a loved one. Overwhelming stress. The brain can't take in anymore. It etches it into the memory of the brain very intently, and then unfortunately it comes back. Now it affects the brain in different ways. It will actually cause some depression, it'll cause some anxiety, and it causes one to get stuck on it. The part of the brain, the gear shifter of the brain, gets stuck. And whenever you're triggered, you get to see this over and over and over again. It brings back the anxiety. It brings back all of the experiences. We actually re-experience those events.
But you threw another term in there, trigger. I know for folks that follow mental health, particularly PTSD, they're familiar with that term. Explain that.
Yeah, say for example, if you're in a combat zone, and you see a young person coming by with a backpack, and you get a little bit suspicious because the last time a young person came by with a backpack, you lost 2 of your buddies. And so all of a sudden that person blows up and you lose your buddies. It's going to have an impact. So, again, when you get back into country, we know from all of our QEEG studies that certain brain waves called beta waves are actually high in folks that have PTSD. It means that they are too good of a learner. They have to learn very well to survive. And unfortunately, it sticks. It doesn't unlearn. So when you get in a situation where you may be driving down the road and you see a young person running towards you with a backpack, that may very well be a trigger. It may take you right back. It could be the sound of a helicopter. It could be smells like diesel fuel. It could be loud noises. Could be quite a few of those things that certainly would be triggers.
And I appreciate that explanation. Let me break it down even simpler for dummies like me. When we're children, I guess we're probably born with this. You can explain that maybe, but fire or touching the stove. You may touch it once. You may stick a knife or a fork into an electrical socket, but you're not going to do it twice unless you're, mentally ill, really bad. Right. But the idea is we learn that. We learn that it's hot, and then it sticks with us for the rest of our life. We don't forget that fire is hot.
Right.
So what you're kind of to draw a parallel with PTSD is that experience so, as you said,
vivid.
It's
vivid. It's vivid and it's etched in your brain. and it's so hard to shake. And we come back and we re-experience. And that's one of the diagnostic criteria, is re-experiencing. Another diagnostic section is avoidance. Avoidance of things that bring back the trauma. There are some folks, and there are people at different levels of the spectrum. There are some folks who will not be able to go see the wall, the Vietnam Wall. There's some people who actually will actually go back to Vietnam. And so there's people along the healing spectrum. I remember one individual told me, he said, well, you know, he's a Vietnam veteran. He said, I think I'm going to go down to Wickham Park again this year. And he said, to the wall. He said, I've been doing that for about 5 years. He said, maybe this year I'll be able to get out of my car. And that kind of sums it up. You know, the triggers are there. And everybody is working toward a healing direction, but it's different for different people. Like I said, some people can go back to the wall and have an experience and work it through. Others say, I never want to go there.
They just avoid it entirely because they know what they might
Experience.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's too painful.
And, you know, recently we've had two very good and popular movies. Both of them are still out there playing. Unbroken, which retells Louis Zamperini's experience during World War II and being a prisoner of war as well as an airplane crash victim. And also American Sniper, which is out there. I guess it's breaking all sorts of records. Both of them have a very strong element of post-traumatic stress disorder, and how the two of them, these particular individuals, channeled that negative part of their life or their brain, whatever impact it had on them, they chose a route, and they had the constitution or the fortitude to do something positive. Now, that's not to say everybody's going to be affected the same way, but I wanted to just bring up real quick, AVET Project is befriended and follows several World War II folks. One Pearl Harbor survivor, Earl Chaffee. Hi, Earl. I know you're listening. And Jerry Walter, POW out of Europe from World War II. And I caution both these gentlemen, I'd love to go to see the movies with them together. But Jerry Walter is kind of hesitant about that Unbroken because of the POW experience.
Oh, sure.
Absolutely.
And how it might reopen those old wounds, or what did you say? It's etched in there, but it's ready to pop right back out.
I sometimes think of it as like a swordfish in a net, you know, it's kind of cutting its way out, or all of their stuff that you've stored in your closet over the years. And you know, the older you get, the more it pushes at the door. Just like they say on Saturday Night Live, the older we get, the more baggage we drag behind us. And as that baggage builds up, it starts pushing at the door. Now, for a lot of our older vets, our Vietnam era vets, you know, they may have used other coping mechanisms. They may have used alcohol, drugs, or they may have also used work. A lot of people use work as workaholics. They may have worked 2 or 3 jobs. When they finally settle down and slow down at age 55, 60, 65, all of a sudden they would have hoped all that stuff was gone, but no, it's been waiting there, and it comes on them like a tsunami wave, and it hits them and they say, where did this come from? It's just as real as it was 40 years ago.
And that's a very important point because, Glenn, you and I both know, representing vets before the VA, it doesn't matter how long a time period or how much time has passed from the date of onset of their problem. Let's say post-traumatic stress that we're talking about.
Right.
World War II vets, you know, combat fatigue or shell shock, they may have termed it back then. And when they file their claim, as long as there's that nexus, that causation between the two events.
Exactly, and actually, with PTSD, the VA is not as likely to say, where's your nexus, if you give them everything they want. You give them a disability benefits questionnaire, you give them the personal statement of the veteran, then they don't look at that like, well, okay, it couldn't be occurring now because it was an experience that went 40 years ago. Whereas they might say that if you've got, suddenly you say, I've got problems with my elbow that I
Exactly.
bummed up in the military 40 years ago.
Right, and it helps to have that that combat citation or award that the VA has to cede as a stressor, because that's one of the qualifiers, is you have to have had something that stressed you out beyond the realm of normal human experience, as they write it up in the code. Talk about that for a moment.
Well, absolutely, and identifying those stressors is so important. And sometimes you can use, I know Glenn will attest to this, buddy statements of folks that you were on active duty with as well to verify that stressor. We've come a long ways in that regard. Back a number of years ago, your military records, when you were processing a claim, would actually have to go, and I still remember his name, to Mr. Hackensack's office in Washington. And I think he had 8 little old ladies who actually sat down there and paged through the books to match up your unit records and unit history. And when I first started in helping folks in this business, this used to take up to 3 years to get validation and verification of those stressors back. Now, one of the neat things that happened with this administration about 4 or 5 years ago is that they convinced the VA to allow the veteran to state his or her own stressor. And I think, I still remember their words. I think it was typical convoluted words, legal words, but I think they say, notwithstanding other circumstances, the veteran's own statement of his or her stressors shall be sufficient to document that the stress actually took place. So that was a big step forward.
And again, I want to just throw it out there that if you are a veteran or you know a veteran that has, and there's a long list of combat awards or citations, everything from obviously a Purple Heart, where, what does that mean, Glenn?
Well, that means you were wounded in combat with the enemy.
Exactly. Whether you have a combat infantry badge, combat rifleman's badge, there's a whole host of medals and awards that the VA is going to look to on your DD-214. And if they see that, then they have to concede that you were in a stressful situation. And by law, they should not be asking you to verify any more of the events or circumstances that led to the award of that, because that in and of itself indicates that you were in a stressful situation. But they still do, and it's unfortunate. Because as we're going to talk about here in a minute, we've got a break coming up, folks. We're going to ask Doc, can you stay over?
Oh, I'll be happy to stay here.
Outstanding. On the next segment, don't go anywhere, folks. We're going to get a little more into that and how you can actually solidify a claim, a well-grounded claim with the VA for compensation, disability compensation, because of your post-traumatic stress disorder. And we may touch on another couple subjects that are related to mental health and military service as well. But folks, we're coming up to the bottom of the break. I want you to listen to some good music on our bumper here. Vince is going to dial it up. That is Soldier Heart, a.k.a. Sergeant Jeff Barillero with his, I mean, folks, you got to check him out at Redcon 1, because we're talking mental health, and that's what he does. He tries to get the message out to everybody that there is hope, and his music is profound. So give it a listen. We'll be right back on American Warrior Radio, right here on the Talk to Me station, AM 1300 WMEL. Don't go anywhere, folks. We're coming right back.
So I'm going to mention also about, you did it with the sniper Kyle, American Sniper. One of the ways in which he dealt with